The U.S. is involved in a proxy war between Israel and Iran, right? So the U.S. is totally overextended. They're totally using fiat money to fund it all. They're printing it by their trillions. They've got $34, $35, $36 trillion worth of debt. The economy is sinking under the interest on that debt, which is now over $1 trillion. It's the biggest line on the line item, bigger than the military defense line item. So they are literally shrinking down to nothing because they're killing themselves by printing all of this fiat money, and the inflation's starting to kick in for real. People are noticing that the purchasing power of their US dollar is collapsing. And therefore, the opposite, of course, is Bitcoin, where the purchasing power is increasing.
In this recent interview with Sovereignty Studios, featuring Max Keiser and Stacy Herbert, 3 key topics are explored: El Salvador's economic transformation through Bitcoin, the global importance of free speech, and Bitcoin's long-term potential as a financial asset. During the discussion, Bitcoin was trading around $58,000, with a 1% increase in the past 24 hours and a 3% rise over the last week.
Stop. You don't have time. Don't miss out this 2025 bull run. Educate yourself first ahead of the crowd. We have created the ultimate step-by-step crypto cheat guide that will guide you this bull run. Unlock the secrets of crypto and make smarter investments today. Now by clicking on the link below to get your exclusive copy just under $10.
This is the time to embrace this country, because the United States and Europe and Canada and Australia have abdicated from the stage in terms of offering free speech. Free speech is no longer on offer in these countries. They are afraid of free speech. They don't want to hear what we have to say. They want to keep a monopoly on all the information, because information is now the new gold. It's the new wealth. It's the new reality. But guess what? Our information is on Bitcoin, and it's unconfiscatable. We're dealing with a situation where the monopolists and the oligopolists and those who really have had a free ride now for decades by controlling the communications are panicking. And they also are rolling into and heading into the buzzsaw of rising inflation. So the economy is shrinking, and the population's getting more and more strident, more and angrier, and hard to control. And what the Economist magazine euphemistically calls social unrest, which you and I would call rioting, is starting to nip at the heels of all the power centers. And talking to people in the business of communications, they still say that First Amendment is protected in the U.S. And the Congress in the U.S. and the Senate in the U.S., by and large, still supports free speech and still supports the First Amendment. But after this next election in November, that may not be the case. We may not have any more a beachhead in the West for free speech. The U.S. is on the verge of tipping over into full-fledged communism, or whatever you want to call it, but it won't be what we've known the U.S. to be famous for 240 years. It's great to have a plan B and maybe a plan A. You know, we're into the fourth turning, and all the cycles are negative. You have a lot of negative cycles converging at the same moment in this time. But it's like El Salvador has already been through 40 years of horrible times, and it's actually coming out of the bad cycle. It's the first country out of the shit, really, that has been kind of being baked into the cake for so many decades. And so it has a chance to be a real leader in the world. It's this new shining city on a hill. The Statue of Liberty is a volcano in El Salvador. The president is kind of like John F. Kennedy meets Steve Jobs, and he's extremely smart, and he's attracting the best and the brightest. And I think that the next 5 years is just going to be this real fast-paced rate of change. And so we're all in for this kind of rise. And Bitcoin is aligning everything up. If everything goes to zero against Bitcoin, that means that everything else is going to line up in a perfect symmetry in a way that Bitcoin can knock down like dominoes. It's the Rosetta Stone of our own consciousness. And so it knows what to do before we do it. And add the fact that we had just met the president, and he was such an intelligent, charming guy, and he went essentially to war against the gangs, and this became essentially a Bitcoin war was fought in El Salvador in 2022 and 2023, and Bitcoin won the war against the gangs with President Bukele and everybody praying for this.
As we just heard, Max Keiser discussed Bitcoin's economic impact on global financial systems, while Stacy Herbert detailed the significant challenges faced by President Bukele in transforming El Salvador. Despite ongoing violence and international skepticism, Bukele's persistence and faith in Bitcoin have led to a remarkable turnaround in the country. Max highlighted how Bitcoin is dismantling traditional power structures and reshaping global economics, while Stacy emphasized the crucial role of strong leadership in this revolutionary movement. Now, let's hear more from Max and Stacy as they explore how El Salvador is leading the global Bitcoin revolution.
Super. Well, Bitcoin is subversive, and it was built by cypherpunks to subvert the system, to allow to exist on the total fringes of society by people who didn't want to be part of society or who had been outcast by society. But they wanted to transact, and so the puzzle that was, how do you have digital gold? How do you have internet money had been a question of cypherpunks for 20 years, and the riddle was finally solved in 2009. And so this was the first conference of the gathering of the total outcasts of society and subversive people who got together. They're all and
built.
and
Cypherpunks write code, right? And that's the same thing as building. Like there's a huge parallel between building Bitcoin and building El Salvador, building the new El Salvador. It's famously cypherpunks write code. They don't talk. They don't tell you about what they're going to do. They just write the freaking code and do it. The same thing here with the new El Salvador. Everybody has told President Bukele that you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't fix El Salvador. It's not possible. It's the homicide capital of the world, and it'll always be the homicide capital of the world. It'll always be a basket case. It'll never achieve anything. It's a tiny little country. It's a little thumb. It's destined to always be tiny and small and nothing. And he was like, okay, and just kept building and just kept doing. And they're like, no, it's not possible. That's not happening. That's not happening. The whole time, the same thing happened with Bitcoin. Early Bitcoin, it's like, ha, ha, ha. Like Financial Times, Bloomberg, the same media publications were saying, it's not possible. You guys are ridiculous. This is stupid money. You guys are freaks. Like, nothing's going to happen. You're money launderers. You're terrorists. You're funding this and that. And the same thing happened. And now, okay, BlackRock wants it. We want it. Wall Street wants it. Wait, Donald Trump is saying, no, we're going to be the Bitcoin capital of the world. So the same process is happening with El Salvador. It's very similar. It's like it started out as very small money, and it became, it's like everybody in the world wants it now. And the same thing with El Salvador is 3 years ago, it was so different here, and President Bukele was not this world famous guy. Bitcoin did shine a spotlight onto him, and that spotlight, he rose to it. He loved the spotlight, and it loved him back, right? And the world got to see what was happening in little El Salvador. And a lot of it was to do with Bitcoin, because that was the thing before the gang war that put the spotlight on El Salvador.
Yeah, and just like everything goes to zero against Bitcoin, I think every other country is going to go to zero against El Salvador in their own way, because we're entering into this 21st century paradigm where this of economics being based now on Bitcoin and Bitcoin as the base layer. As someone had said already, you have to have Bitcoin as the base layer to build upon, and then you're building something that's solid. Anything that's built on fiat money, of course, can crumble, and just like it's crumbling right now. And so here we have the first mover advantage, and we see the benefits happening every single day. And I think the next 5 years in the president's second term, you're going to see an acceleration of all the positive trends that we saw in the first 5 years.
Yeah, we've said that to him for years now, is like, by attracting the best and the brightest, you maintain that first mover advantage by all of the best and brightest, and the builders, the people who actually do stuff and not say stuff and tweet stuff about what they're going to do. They just actually come and build. Get those people, And then the second countries, this is like 3 years ago that we're saying like the next countries that adopt Bitcoin. And of course the crash, the big Bitcoin bear market and all the like FTX and Celsius and all those companies collapsing, it seemed absurd at that time. Everybody's like, ha ha, El Salvador is going to be a basket case. It's all a failure. That was a dumb thing to do. But we were talking about the next countries. And I said, if you get all the best builders here, like the next countries are going to have to settle for, you know, Cardano or something. They're going to like get the shit coins. They're not going to have the Bitcoiners, because you get the Bitcoiners, they're the builders. Everybody else talks and talks and talks and talks about what their fork and their additions to their new, like whatever there's, I don't even know what that stuff does outside there, but they talk a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. First of all, what's happening, in my view, is that Bitcoin is, I often ask the question on social media, is it reacting to the chaos or is it causing the chaos? I think in a large part it's causing the chaos. And a lot of countries are going to take themselves out of the game by getting into unwinnable wars funded by fiat money. Bitcoin, which is the currency here in El Salvador, it's unconfiscatable, and the country's stacking Bitcoin every day. They've got almost $500 million worth of Bitcoin, and they're stacking every single day. And so they have that beacon of appeal that you, as a Cuban who would escape communism and go to the U.S., you now have people in the U.S. You have 500,000 Salvadorans who fled the country who are now moving back to El Salvador. The diaspora are moving back to El Salvador. People in the U.S. who want a family experience for their family without some of the crazy social justice nonsense that you see in the U.S. are coming to El Salvador because they have strong family values. And you see the numbers at the border. You have reverse migration. Instead of Salvadorans going to the U.S., you have mostly people in the U.S. going to El Salvador. It's reverse migration. So it's coming here. So to your point about, well, can El Salvador withstand an attack, right, if the U.S. decides to attack countries? And of course, the U.S. is already attacking countries, right? NATO is the U.S., and they're involved in a proxy war against Russia. You've got the U.S. is involved in a proxy war, China and Taiwan.
As we just heard, Max Keiser highlighted Bitcoin's role in decentralizing global financial systems, while Stacy Herbert discussed the challenges President Bukele faced in transforming El Salvador. We'd love to hear your thoughts on a few questions. Could Bitcoin's impact in El Salvador set a precedent for other nations? And how do you think it will continue to reshape financial power dynamics globally? For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.